Checks and balances are one of the reasons that our government works, and they are set up in the first 3 articles of the Constitution. Article 1 establishes Congress. Our Congress is made up of 2 separate bodies. This happened because at the time of establishing our country, there was pushback from larger and smaller states. Larger or more populated states wanted a Congress made up of representation based on population size. Smaller states wanted equal representation for each state. This led to what is called the Great Compromise, creating a bicameral legislature made up of 2 separate chambers. The House of Representatives, where each state gets represented based on population, and there are currently 435 members of the House, each serving 2-year terms. But that number is subject to change after each federal census. In the Senate, each state gets 2 representatives, so there are only 100. For that number to change, we would have to induct a new state, which can only be done by a congressional vote, as well as a vote in the territory being granted statehood. Senators serve 6-year terms. There is debate over whether or not there should be term limits on Congress, because right now they can serve as long as they are re-elected, and it's led to some representatives being there for decades. The heads of those 2 branches are elected differently. The Speaker of the House is elected by the House and is going to be a member of the majority party. Currently, it's Mike Johnson, a Republican from Louisiana. The President of the Senate is the Vice President of the United States and is only able to vote if there is a tie. So currently, that is J.D. Vance. Article 1 also grants them specific powers. Their main purpose is to create and pass laws, but they do a lot more. They set the national budget, and it is said that they have the power of the purse. They can kill a presidential plan by just not funding it, although it comes with pushback and can lead to a government shutdown, where some federal employees may not get this, includes the military, although they get back pay once a budget has been set. They are the only branch that can declare war and have the power of impeachment. They regulate commerce through the Commerce Clause, which gives them the power to control all commerce throughout the country, between states, between the U.S. and other nations, and between Native American tribes. While this is the case, you may have noticed that the president has placed tariffs on other countries. This isn't really a power he has from the Constitution, but one that was partially passed on to the executive branch through the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, and it only applies under very specific circumstances. Currently, it has become an area of debate since the Trump administration has placed tariffs on foreign nations without congressional approval. The question is, do the executive branch's justifications meet the requirements to use the Trade Act? It has currently become a topic of debate. One of the most controversial powers gets its name thrown around a lot more than it actually gets used, and it can actually be used for more than just the president, and that's impeachment. The way that impeachment works is if someone in the House of Representatives believes that an impeachable offense has been committed, they can file articles of impeachment which can then be voted on by the House, and it only takes a simple majority. If it goes through, the person has been impeached, but the Senate decided whether or not to remove them from office, which is done by 2/3 vote. There have only ever been 3 presidents in all of history to be impeached. Nixon was never impeached. He was able to resign from office before articles of impeachment were voted on, though it's a common misconception that he was impeached after Watergate. Andrew Johnson was the first president to be impeached in 1868 and was only kept from being removed from office by 1 vote in the Senate, Bill Clinton in 1998. While his impeachment stemmed from an affair, the impeachment was for lying under oath. And last, Donald Trump. Trump was impeached twice in 2019 for abuse of power and again in 2021 for encouraging the January 6th Capitol attack. In all of these cases, they were saved by the Senate. Federal judges haven't always been so lucky. Across the federal government, only 21 people have ever been impeached, and of that, only 8 have ever been removed. All federal judges for a list of offenses from bribery, perjury, improper conduct to being drunk on the job. While impeachment is often controversial, it's an important part of Congress's responsibility for oversight on the other 2 branches and integral to their role in the system of checks and balances. Article 2 creates the executive branch made up of the president, vice president, and their cabinet members, each of who have to be voted on by Congress before taking their place in the cabinet. Article 2, along with the 22nd Amendment, gives specific rules for being president. You must be a natural-born U.S. citizen and have lived inside of the country for at least 14 consecutive years. Being the president is an extremely stressful job, and you can generally see it in how much it ages people that hold the office. The 22nd Amendment restricts sitting presidents from running for more than 2 terms. It was put into place in the 1950s after FDR ran and won for 4 consecutive terms. Before him, it was an unspoken rule amongst leaders to step down at the end of the 2nd term without there needing to be an amendment preventing it going all the way back to George Washington. While some were offered a chance to run for a 3rd term until FDR, they had all turned it down. The president is the commander-in-chief, giving him control of the military. And while it takes an act of Congress to declare war, the president can send troops without telling Congress for 48 hours and keep them wherever that place is for up to 60 days without congressional approval. While the president can't declare war that gives him plenty of time to start one, he also enforces and executes federal laws and oversees agencies such as the FBI, IRS, and EPA. This is his primary responsibility. When it comes to his place in checks and balances, he has the power to veto any bill passed by Congress. While Congress does have the ability to overturn a veto with 2/3 vote, it doesn't happen often and gives him a lot of influence over the legislative process. He is required to give State of the Union addresses and has the ability to call special sessions of Congress as well. The 2 powers that are often criticized are granting pardons. As in many cases in recent history, it has been seen as being political motivated and not as a correction of misjustice. The other is executive orders. This gives the president the ability to make a proclamation that bypasses Congress. And while it can be seen as overreach, especially when several are passed at the same time, no one will probably ever come close to beating the record set by FDR, who around the time of creating the New Deal signed over 3,000, many of which were shot down by the Supreme Court. FDR attempted to pack the Supreme Court so that he could push more of them through, but as Congress is in charge of maintaining the number of Supreme Court justices, they didn't go along with it. While people may see executive orders sometimes as an overreach, people also tend to complain about Congress bickering amongst themselves, being out of touch with their constituents and overall just not getting much done. The president appoints the Supreme Court justices when a vacancy comes open, but he also appoints all other federal judges throughout the country. And these appointments come without a term limit, so they are there. Until death, they step down or are removed from office through impeachment. This is done to ensure they remain bipartisan and aren't influenced by party ideology in order to keep their seat. Should something happen to the president, he dies in office, is removed through impeachment, or is removed through the 25th Amendment due to no longer being able to remain in office due to health or other reasons. It's common knowledge that the vice president takes his place, but what happens if something happens to both the president and his VP? The third in line is the Speaker of the House. After that, it would go to cabinet heads by order of when their position was created. Whether or not that would go over with the American public is yet to be seen, as we have never had to go past the vice president. This was set up by the Presidential Succession Act of 1947. Before that, even though it had been a relatively smooth transaction between president and vice president, in the few occasions that it has happened, it wasn't explicitly spelled out. This brings us to Article 3 that sets up the judicial branch. This isn't just the Supreme Court, it also covers all lower federal courts, and there are some amendments and a section in Article 1 that further explain your rights inside the judicial system. Article 1 explains habeas corpus. It requires the government to justify why you are being held. The 4th through 8th Amendments put some protections and limits to what a federal judge can do, and your rights protecting you from unreasonable treatment. The 4th Amendment covers unlawful searches and seizures. The 5th, due process, self-incrimination and double jeopardy. 6th, your right to a speedy trial, impartial jury, notice of charges, right to confront witnesses, and your right to an attorney. 7th covers civil cases, and the 8th covers unreasonable bail, fines, or cruel and unusual punishment. While federal courts play a part in this and have been crucial in blocking some of the current administration's executive orders, leading to questions as of whether they should have that power. We're going to focus more specifically on the Supreme Court. It's made up of 9 members, including the Chief Justice, and they don't see near as many cases as lower courts. It takes a lot for most cases to make it to them, because the majority of cases will start at the district court level and work their way up to the Supreme Court through appeals. The other reason for this is that they only take on cases that are going to have significant implications. One of the most recent is Dobbs-Jackson Women's Health Organization, where federal abortion rights previously granted through Roe v. Wade was overturned and the power to decide it on those rights sent back to the states. If you don't agree with that decision, it could understandably be upsetting and maybe even make you wonder why they are allowed to overturn their own rulings. But the fact that they can is a good thing when we look at the bigger historical picture. We know that Brown v. the Board of Education ended segregation in school, but what gets overlooked is that just some decades earlier, in the case of Plessy v. Ferguson, the Supreme Court had upheld segregation in schools, stating that separate but equal was constitutional. It doesn't take all of the justices agreeing to make a ruling, just a simple majority, and those with a dissenting opinion, while it may be valid, don't have a way to change the outcome. There are some instances where cases go straight to the Supreme Court, without having to work their way through the system. These cases include disputes between two or more states, ambassadors or public ministers, disputes between state and federal government, and disputes between a state and citizens of another state or foreign country. Outside of that, they also have what is called judicial review. Every ruling that they make is to be based on their interpretation of the Constitution, and they can use that to strike down laws or government actions. If Congress passes a law or the President signs an executive order that they believe to be unconstitutional, they have the power to declare it invalid. It was first tried through Marbury v. Madison in 1803, where Chief Justice John Marshall declared that it's the duty of the courts to say what the law is, and if a law conflicts with the Constitution wins. Let's break down checks and balances one more time. The Congress makes laws and oversees the judicial and executive branches, having the last say on who is placed in office. This includes presidential appointments for his cabinet and for the courts. They can keep them accountable through making them report on the issues they have been working on, and through the possibility of impeachment if their actions aren't in line with the power of their office. The president can make appointments including to the vacant seats in the Supreme Court, but again, all of those must be voted on by the Congress. He also has the power of the veto to keep Congress in check if he believes that a law is no good, and the power of the executive order so that laws can be put into place without congressional approval, though those can be overturned or even undone by the Supreme Court or the next president, which we have seen happen recently, and last the Supreme Court. In the end, they have the last say as to what is constitutionally legal and what isn't. While they can't create law and only work within existing laws, their rulings keep unchecked power from running rampant and shape the landscape of laws within the country.